In part 1, I showed you the basics of how I shoot set surveys. In this, part 2, I'll show you how to process that set survey in Synthesize. So let's get right into it. I'm doing two things. I'm speeding up the footage and I'm removing noise. Let's start at the end with just the retimed footage. How am I retiming it? It's fairly simple. So if I go in the survey bin right here, I'm gonna grab the mid graffiti removed. I'm just gonna drag that onto the timeline. If I wanna speed this up, it's really very simple. I just hit Command R and it puts it in retime mode. And then I can just select down here, what's the speed I want? 100%, 110%, 200, 400. Well, I'm gonna speed these up by 4 times. So I'm gonna set that to 400. There, that's retimed. And let's play it. There you go. When we retime this footage, we want to just skip print. That's an old film term. You would just skip frames and then print a frame and skip more frames and print a frame. So we're printing every 4th frame. But in computer parlance, we call that nearest frame. That we'll find down here in the project settings. So if you look at the very bottom of this page where it says frame interpolation, you see the retime process is set to nearest. We can set this to frame blend or optical flow, but we definitely don't want that for 3D tracking. So let's walk through, let's go to the first clip, and I'm gonna walk you through the denoise process. I typically use Neat Video for this, but since I'm doing all of this on an M1 Mac Mini, I'm still waiting for an M1 native Neat Video. The denoise process can be found in the color room. So we'll go to color. All the denoising happens right here in motion effects. I'm using temporal noise reduction. What it's doing is analyzing subsequent and preceding frames and determining how to blend those together to create a denoise. And it's the most gentle kind of denoise that exists in Resolve. So this is the denoise process. How many frames are we gonna use? We'll use 3. Let's actually set this back to 0 so that there's no denoise happening. You can see that fairly clearly. There's a lot of film grain, a lot of noise. Let's set it to 1. So it's just gonna use 1 frame. And you can see that the effects are fairly gentle. Let's set it to 2. It's a little stronger. It's still not totally overwhelmingly strong. And I'll set it to 3. And I don't even know if you could see the difference between 2 and 3. I can see it here, but after YouTube and H.264 compression, you probably can't even see it. But the speed difference between 2 and 3 is not great, so it's not a big cost to set it to 3. But I do want to show you a couple things, like down in here. Let's set this down to 0. So if you watch our frame, it's kind of getting manipulated. That can be a problem in the 3D tracking world. I don't think this is going to be so heinous, but you should be aware of that. If you don't want to analyze through time and start merging frames subsequent and preceding, well then you could do spatial noise reduction. So let's try that. I'm just going to turn up these values and we'll start seeing the effect, and wow, that really, that hits pretty hard. And you can really see a lot of artifacts. It creates these strange, almost checkerboard design artifacts. That's spatial noise reduction. Spatial noise reduction for this purpose is probably not great. We'll turn these back down. Back in temporal noise reduction with this set to 3. Very gentle, it's removing the noise but maintaining detail. And these controls, the temporal controls, work very much the same way as in spatial. You've got luma and chroma. And so you can dial these down for less of an effect or dial them way up all the way to the top. But even when you dial them all the way to the top, you don't get really hard image destroying artifacts and that sort of thing. All right, so now that we've set up our noise reduction, we've set it up on this clip. We can go to the second clip. We can look at our noise reduction here. That's set to 3. We've got our temporal thresholds jacked all the way up. And then we'll look at our last shot, which has no noise reduction, but just a speed up. How do we render these? Well, you do that in the delivery room right down here. You might think when you do this that you should set this to individual clips. You can't. But if I render a single clip, I'm going to get all 3 of these shots. That's a problem too. So how do we deal with that problem? So I'm going to zoom into the timeline, right to the cut point. I have snapping on, so it snaps right to that cut point. I'm going to hit the O key, which is out, which I'm going to set an out point right there. But be very careful. If I zoom way in, you're going to see my out point extends to the beginning, to the first frame of the next shot. These tick marks, those aren't the frame. The space between the tick marks is the frame. So when we set an out point here, that's this frame. We don't want that. So we can just tap the left arrow, and now when we hit out, it's going to set our out point there. So let's give this a file name. We'll hit browse. And I've already rendered these out, but I'm going to show you how I rendered them out. This is the mid graffiti removed denoised. So this is mid denoised, and then I'll hit save. So cool, I'm gonna add that to the render queue. There it is. So if I go to this frame and I hit in right there, and I go to this frame and I hit O right there, and then I zoom in, Command plus, and I'm gonna see I have that extra frame again. Let's back that up. You can just drag this. You don't even have to hit I and O. You just drag it. Now, this, we need a new name. So this is the 4 times denoised. We'll hit save. After that's done, I have to add it to the render queue. Really important. So let's add that to the render queue. Last but not least, we go to this frame and we hit in. Let's zoom back out, go to our last frame here and hit O for out, zoom in. But because there are no frames, there are no additional shots later, the out point becomes the very end of the timeline. That's the only exception to that rule of having to back up that one frame. For this one, this is the 4 times graffiti removed, so this is not denoised. Let's go to browse, and we're gonna say this one is the 4 times mid, and we'll hit save. And then we're going to add to the render queue, and then I can hit the render button and it will just sequentially go through and render all of the shots. Perfect. So that pretty much covers how you render all of your clips sped up and denoised from Resolve. What I'm going to show you here is what I do with all the footage that I denoised and retimed in Resolve, and to the original media with no retime and no denoise. It's my to-do list on all set surveys. I'm starting on the original, grainy, but sped up footage. So let's go through my to-do list. Let's load the footage. This time we are going to load, as promised, just the 4 times sped up footage with no denoise. Open. I'm going to leave all of this exactly as it is, but I'm going to go into the preprocessor and I'm going to set up my Hicon color preset. So let's create a new preset. We're going to call this Hicon, H-I-C-O-N. And then I'm going to turn off resolution, lens, stabilization, region of interest related, and leave only color and blur as usual. Let's go into levels, and I'm going to set the high to 0.75, and I'm going to set the gamma to 0.5. I'm going to do this on every single shot. They're all going to have exactly the same settings. So I've already cached these frames, so it's going to play at a faster speed, and I'm going to be able to scrub through them much more quickly. So we're going to go to the features room. I'm going to click on advanced. I'm going to set the small blip size to 8. I'm going to set the large blip size to 16. And I'm going to hit blips all frames. Here are my blips. So I'm going to go back here to the advanced feature control. I'm going to set the maximum tracker count to 1,000. After that, we just hit peel all. Let's go to the solver room. We're going to turn on calculate distortion and we're going to hit go. First thing I'm going to do is clean up trackers. Clean up trackers. I'm going to turn on bad frames. I'm going to switch this to disable and I'm going to hit fix. Then I'm going to switch my solve mode to refine, and I'm going to hit go again. Okay, so that solve time was 0.8 seconds. So let's do this one more time. And I only do it one more time. You can't do this too many times without starting to degrade your solve. But I have 1,000 initial trackers, so I can afford to do this a bit. So I'm gonna hit clean up trackers. I'm gonna leave all of this as it was, fix. Great. Now I'm gonna hit go one more time, which brings our error down to 0.7964 and a solve time of 0.7 seconds. That's my step-by-step process for doing every single set survey. I ran all of the shots I retimed and denoised through that to-do list to see which was fastest and gave the best results. The error on every solve for every shot was about 0.8 horizontal pixels. So they were all pretty much the same in terms of tracking quality. Now let's just focus on raw speed. The winner is the footage we just did, the original grainy media that was simply sped up by 400%. That took 2 minutes, 26 seconds. Second place goes to the original, not retimed grainy footage, with a total time from getting the media to a final solve of 9 minutes and 11 seconds. In third place, we have the 400% sped up denoised footage with a total time of 16 minutes and 6 seconds. The slowest time is the original, not sped up, but denoised footage with a total time of 29 minutes and 23 seconds. Here's the moral of this story. Denoising takes a long time, so unless your footage is spectacularly grainy, best to just speed it up by 400% and get on with your day. Synthesize isn't going to have much trouble dealing with the film grain. A lot of people like to use constraints to align their scenes. I typically don't. I like to just manipulate my scenes into place and then lock them down. Let's click on the whole button and we're going to translate the whole scene, camera and all, point cloud, everything. Let's move this down a bit. The first thing that we can do to help align the scene, we have these two walls. Let's rotate that. There we go. So this looks pretty good. Next thing we have to do is that we have to lock this to some kind of space, establish a scale. I did a little manual tracking and I dropped 2 trackers into the scene. Let's go to the tracker room. Let's take a look at these trackers. So this tracker up in the upper left-hand corner of that wall, and then another tracker right here up on that corner. Why did I pick those? When you're out on set, you should be measuring things. Measure many things. Measure as many things as you can. You're gonna have plenty of time on your hands between setups and whatnot. Olaf, when he went out and shot this footage for me, he took copious measurements. He has a measurement here that goes from this edge of the wall all the way to the corner where the 2 walls meet. And that measurement is 1,249 centimeters. So let's take a look. We know that this tracker and this tracker should be that distance apart. Something to remember about Synthesize. Synthesize doesn't have a unit system. You can't set it to inches or to centimeters. You just decide. You decide, what units am I working in? I'm gonna work in centimeters. And so therefore, I'm gonna set up a distance constraint between these 2 trackers. I'm gonna select the first tracker. I'm gonna hold down the command key on my Mac and I'm gonna click on this tracker here. And you'll notice that when you do that, this little faint gray line appears, indicating that there is a constraint between these 2 trackers. What kind of constraint? I'm only gonna put in a distance. This distance is going to be 1249. I am working in centimeters. Let's go to the solver, make sure I can see everything in all these different views. Let's zoom out a bit. And I'm gonna just hit refine. Go. Whoa! Holy cow. It just rescaled my scene. it rescaled it by quite a big amount because we set it at distance constraint. So let's move our scene around again, because every time we do this, we're gonna need to move our scene to realign everything. I'm gonna show you how to stop that from happening right now as well. Now that we've got the scene scaled properly and aligned properly, the next thing we need to do is pick some points, preferably points that have a decent lifespan. This one looks pretty good. That one's not terrible. So let's lock that tracker. How do I lock trackers? I say set seed, and it pumps these values down here, the solved values, into the seed and lock numbers. I'm gonna turn off seed. We're gonna use this as a lock. So we're gonna say lock point. That point is locked. Let's find another point to lock. You know what else might be good is this other manual tracker that we did. Let's set seed on that, turn off the seed, and say lock point. So we've locked those 2 points. Let's see what else we have down here. Just gonna audition a few of these. This one's okay. Let's pump that into seed, and we'll say lock point. Let's do one more. This one looks like it's probably a good tracker. Yeah, that one's got quite a lifetime. So let's also set seed, turn off the seed, and lock point. So we've locked those 4 points. Now when we go back into the solver room, where we can see our solve, I've got this set to refine. I'm gonna hit go. Nothing happened. That's not true. It did resolve the scene. It's just that when you have 4 points locked, they're locked. It's gonna lock the whole scene to those 4 points. So your scene's not gonna keep moving around and rescaling or doing anything like that. So set your scene scale with your distance constraint, lock a few points, and you're good. Let's measure a few things. So let's go back to our measurements. Well, we know that this measurement, this 1249 measurement, that we know is locked in. And it looks like this measurement is 222 centimeters. So just to test how accurate Synthesize is in the 3D room, I'm gonna make a plane. I'm gonna look at it from this general view right here. Just drag out a plane. And let's do a couple things. Let's say view, turn off solid meshes. Let's make this white just so we can see it a little better. And let's change the subdivisions to something a bit easier to see. So like 4 and 8. That's probably good. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna force this value right here. This is our height. Let's hold down the shift key while we adjust that so we can see it moving faster. Great, so that's our height. We're gonna plug in that value that we just said earlier, 222 centimeters. And let's shrink this down a bit to 71, because that's what it shows us on our set survey photo. So now I'm gonna move that over in this direction to over here. And then from the top view, I'm just gonna pick one of these tracking points, like this tracker right here. Actually, let's pick that tracker. So we can see that these trackers are a little farther out. So we're right about in here. And if I move this up now, let's hold down the control key while we do that to get finer control. Oh my gosh, look at that. So I plugged in these values and it lines up to that space perfectly. What this tells you is that if you take these measurements and do your set survey, you can now go through your set and measure other things and get measurements long after they have broken down and cleared out, after they've packed up, gone home, and everything's gone to editorial. I can go back to this set and I can measure things after the fact. That pretty much covers it. When I get my set survey from the shoot, I first speed it up by 400% and run my to-do list. My survey is processed in a couple of minutes, and I can start using it to help solve my challenging 3D tracking shots immediately. In the next tutorial in this series, I'll be showing you how to use your processed set survey to help 3D track those challenging shots. And I'll show you how to lock all your solves to one location. which can really help your CGI layout and lighting teams. I'll also cover how you can merge multiple overlapping surveys. And part 3 is where we will see the importance of having a set survey. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching, stay safe out there, and have fun tracking.